Welcome to the first episode of Wrestling with the Plot. That's what I'm going to call it. This is where I talk about professional wrestling and really talk about the stories of professional wrestling. I'm not going to talk about the booking. I'm not going to talk about the backstage drama, who's dating who. I'm not going to talk about if these characters are real. What I am going to talk about are some of the well-known and not so well-known stories in professional wrestling. Not the backstage rumor. We're going to talk about the actual stories that happen on television. We're going to try to break them down, what they mean, how they're acted, what the overall plot is. Not the booking as far as who should win or who should lose, but the booking as far as how do you tell this story in this man opera. I want to talk about today in this first episode, I've been kind of ruminating over this. I think what I'm going to talk about today, which is the story of the WThe, I think it's the most important story that professional wrestling is ever going to tell. And I'm going to start out by equating this story to Sesame Street. Put a pin in that Sesame Street thing, because I'm going to come back to it. So as we all know, Wyndham Rotunda, a.k.a. Bray Wyatt, left this mortal coil last August. And as a fellow Troy State alum and wrestling fan, I was saddened. And it came at a particularly hard time for me as I was already dealing with a lot of loss in my own life. And I'm going to put a link in the description box. I didn't think about this at first. There are other wrestling channels, the Friendos actually, were the first ones to talk about this. I'm going to link their video in the description box, this video. And it inspired me to do this channel because what I want to talk about is the reason that this story, the WThe story, is so important is that it's the first time where someone died in wrestling. And not only did they publicly mourn it, but it was used by the people involved, not just as a mechanism for their own journey, and not just as a mechanism for the fans' journey in various ways, but as kind of an example of this is how this goes. So everybody talks about the 5 or 7 stages of grief. I'm probably going to list them over here. And I'm probably going to go through them about different parts about how this is going to work within the story. But as a quick overview for this first episode, understand that other people, like I say in the description box below, have talked about this WThe story as a meditation on grief. And what's important about that is that it's not just Bo Dallas ruminating and experiencing the loss of Bray Wyatt, but it's Taylor Rotunda publicly going through the loss of his brother. And you're going to see these characters and this man go through the stages of grief. And the beauty of what's going to happen with this is that he's not alone. There'll be some discussion of the characters themselves, how, like, some of the idea, because this wasn't an idea that Taylor came up with. Not by himself, like it wasn't a thing that this was kind of a thing that Bray Wyndham was kind of working on. Even he was talking about it on Twitter before his release. But in a nutshell, here is this singular individual who lost his brother, and he's going through the stages of grief. We'll talk about the first stage of grief in the next episode and how that has played out in the first few weeks of this group coming on the scene, the violence in their appearance, what they did to Chad Gable, and how other artists in the space, notably Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins, are keeping part of the earlier story alive. I'm going to talk about that too, because that's important. All of these people knew Wyndham, and all of these people had a part in the story he was building with The Fiend, building with Bray, and in something that wasn't done before in wrestling before that, changes that were things that happened within that earlier story have kept going. And I think that's important. And I'm going to talk about that down the line, especially as those guys become touched by this larger story. But remember I talked about Sesame Street earlier. I mentioned it a couple minutes ago. So a lot of people haven't seen the earlier episodes of Sesame Street. They're all on YouTube. But I remember watching it and watching, there's an episode arc of, because you meet, it's Mr. Hooper. You meet Mr. Hooper, you like him, he's a grocery store guy, and he becomes a friend to you as a viewer of Sesame Street. He becomes like this comforting presence. And most, if you're of a certain age, the death of Mr. Hooper and the explanation of that to Big Bird on Sesame Street is the first time you ever had something in your life someone died. And I think it changed all the viewers of the show. And it was an expectation of, we're going to put this on a level for you. We're gonna teach you everything we know, so that when you're out in the world, when you become an adult, you might show these episodes to your kids, and they're gonna get this lesson for free and not have to pay for it. In the same way, Taylor doing a public grieving of his death, of his brother's death, is a lesson to kids and adults who will go through this or are going through this, that it's okay to not be okay. You're going to lash out. You're going to bargain. You're going to deny it. And that's okay. The reason I think this is the most important story they're ever going to tell is that everybody's in on it. Most of the people watching understand that this is a ride we're on because we're all living this ride. Yes, there's going to be some story and people, there are a ton of people nitpicking it all over the internet wrestling community, but that's not the point. The point really is that this story is meta. It is Taylor mourning his brother. It is these characters going through that. But it's also these individual wrestlers too on this journey expressing this grief. And I will close this by saying this. The last video they did where Taylor is, as Bo Dallas is talking to Uncle Howdy, and he asked him, how did you feel when your brother died? And Taylor gives a genuine answer to how he felt when his brother died. There's going to be a video next week. And that video is going to be Ramblin' Rabbit, Eric Rowan, and his interview. And for those who don't know, Eric Rowan, original member of the Wyatt family, best friends with Luke Harper aka Brody Lee, who we lost several years ago, and now to deal with the loss of Wyndham. He's the last man left. Him and Braun are the last man left. He's the last member of the original Whites. And so the story he's going to tell in that video because this is the first time, there are a lot of WWE fans who don't watch AEW and have not seen the Brody Lee tributes and all the stuff that company has done for years to help Luke Harper's family, or Brody Lee's family, Amanda and his 2 sons, and all the stuff that Big E and Cody and that all the people who were close to him just, we got you, right? And to watch his sons interact with all these people, they try to make it fun, they try to keep it light, and they try not to have their father's loss weigh on them, right? Because you look at Cody's a grown man. He lost his father a few years ago. His father, to him, like every son, your father is your hero. Your father is Superman. And even when Dusty got old, Dusty was still Superman. That view doesn't change. So Harper's friends have been trying to keep his family lifted, keep his friends lifted, but then you look at these men in their private moments. Who's lifting them up, right? Who's carrying them? When you see this video next week, Harper is going to talk about, the first time to that audience, he's going to talk about these losses, how it's affected him. That first couple videotapes where it's just Bo, it's just Taylor going through it. That was hard to watch because you know that's the epicenter of this story. There's all this weight coming, what Eric's going to say. And it's not just going to be the script. It's not just going to be the story. It's not just going to be the booking. The other piece of this is that it's going to be the first time he's talking to this audience about all of this stuff he's been carrying for a long time. And the vulnerability I think he's going to show, I think is important for people to see. And I think it's important this is why I say it's so important that there is no right way to mourn. There's no wrong way to do it. You're just doing whatever you're doing. That's why this story is important, because it's allowing everybody to go through this together and work on it together and feel it and pay tribute to the people that we lost, like Harper, and pay tribute to the people we lost, like Bray Wyndham, and yet carry out the last thing he was working on, which is going to be the subject of the next video. I want to look this up because I got it in my bookmarks. I don't know if that's not it. It's something that Nicola Glencross posted. It's the thing that she said. She said, grief is the price we pay for love. If you follow her on X, Twitter, that the red circle. And that circle is something that Bray was doing. It's the first time you see that's what's happening. We're going to meld these two pieces of media together. It's the first time that he uses that circle that you see that it's that kind of story, that that's a continuation of something he was already doing on Twitter. This story's it's interconnected, but that's the this is the first episode of Wrestling with the Plot. Eventually, I'm going to talk about other plots other than this particular story. So you please like, share, subscribe to this new thing that I'm doing on this channel. If you want me to talk about other wrestling stories, other wrestling plots, old and new, I'll go back and rewatch the video and do a little do my little research and talk about it. One of the other things I'm probably going to talk about, probably in the third episode of this, to kind of zig where I always zag on all the other channels. I am going to, because I want to mention this at the end here. I am going to talk about John Cena in the third episode, because with John Cena's impending retirement, he answered some questions at the press conference after the last PLE that I thought were very instructive. If you haven't watched that press conference, I think go watch at least the John Cena part, because I think what he talked about was very instructive. To look back on his story, I think, in light of what he answering those questions, is very interesting. So we'll talk about that in the third episode. The next episode, we're going to talk about the stages of grief and how how I expect them to work, how I expect them to kind of be laid out. But I think that how they get laid out, I hope it's a surprise. But we're going to talk about the first stage of grief in the next episode, and we'll zigzag through these. I want to, as the Wyatt 6 story goes along, there'll be more things about that. So like I say, I'm not doing their C Wrestling does a breakdown of the wrestling version of this idea, that here's what the QR codes, all this stuff means, and now all that's fun. I just want to talk about the story. So thank you for coming to this edition of Wrestling with a Plot. It's the first episode. Episode dos, episode 2, soon to follow. Like, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Thanks.